If you've ever thought about crocheting socks but felt a little intimidated, I've got you. Crochet socks are a super fun project, but they do have their quirks that make them very different from their knitted counterparts. My name is Julie and I am a huge fan of crochet socks. In fact, if you already know me, that might be why. Eons ago, when I started teaching crochet at a local yarn shop near me, knitters there were convinced that you couldn't crochet socks, or that if you could, they would not be comfortable. You would not be able to wear them in shoes. They wouldn't fit, and they'd use too much yarn to be interesting. I'm here to tell you that not only are crochet socks absolutely possible, they're also super comfortable. They fit in your shoes, and generally speaking, they only require a single skein of fingering weight sock yarn, just like their knitted counterparts. A word on that before I get into my best tips and tricks, but you probably already know this, but I can't have a talk about crochet socks and not mention that if you want your socks to be durable, you're going to absolutely need them to have at least 10% of nylon in the fiber content. The nylon makes the sock just a little bit more durable. So yeah, today I'm going to be sharing my best tips and tricks to help you make crochet socks that fit, feel good on your feet, and do not turn into a frustrating project. We're going to talk about 4 things. Why toe-up socks are great for beginners, the 2 most common heel types, how to avoid the dreaded second sock syndrome, and why crochet stretch is different and how that will affect your sock design. Grab your yarn, make yourself comfortable, and let's dive in. So the first thing I want to talk about is that, to me, toe up is best for beginners. Let's start with how to build a sock. There are 2 main ways to build your sock. You can go from the toe up, or you can go from the cuff down. There are other ways, but those are the 2 main ones. I always recommend toe up for beginners because that way, that direction of work gives you the most power and control over the fit of your sock. Here's why toe up to me is a game changer. You can try the sock on as you go. There's no more guessing if they're gonna fit. You don't have to crochet the entire sock and then be disappointed. Literally, you can put them on at every single step and confirm that they still fit. If the socks feel too tight or too loose, you can fix it right then before you crochet the rest of the sock. And you can also maximize your yarn. If you're working from stashed yarn, a single skein, you don't want to run out halfway through the leg. You can just weigh your socks or weigh your yarn and then crochet until you run out of yarn on the leg. So that's, my recommendation. Look for patterns that specify that they are toe up. That will be best for your crochet sock adventures. My own patterns, aside from the ones that are not constructed in this manner, which I'll get into a little bit later, they're all toe up. So now we're going to talk about the 2 main heel types, which are short row and afterthought. The heel is probably the part of the crochet sock that scares people the most or worries people the most, but it doesn't have to be scary or stressful. I feel like if you are worried about the heel, it's probably because you've knit socks before. But I'm here to tell you that contrary to the knit socks, when you get to the heel section of a crochet sock, you're still only using 1 hook. So, that makes that a whole lot easier to handle. The 2 most common heel types are short row and afterthought. So short row heels are simply are crocheted directly onto the work. So you're going to do your toe section, then the foot, and then you're going to do the short row heel. In the first half of the short row heel, you're working across part of the row, and then each time you're decreasing a little bit, and this creates a sort of a little shape at the end of your foot. It's kind of the same way your foot, right? Your foot ends in a point at the back of the heel. So this is what you're doing in the first step of the short row heel. And then in the second half, what you're doing is you're working back toward the main foot section by doing increases on either side of the short row section. So you're basically closing that, making a rounded shape for your heel to fit in. And then after that, you're going to crochet the leg all the way around. The afterthought heel is a little bit different. You make it as an afterthought to the sock. So what happens is you're going to crochet the toe and then the foot, and then you're going to chain, or whatever the pattern says to do. You're going to crochet a chain, and you're going to work the leg around the foot stitches and that chain, crochet the leg. And that leaves an opening in the bottom here so that you can go crochet the heel, usually kind of like crocheting a hat from the brim to the crown, where you're going to decrease until the tip of the heel. What's cool about afterthought heels is that you can make them in different colors. When they get worn out, the toe and the heel are the sections that get worn out the quickest in handmade socks. And so if you made the afterthought heel, you can just frog it and make a new heel in its place. So that's pretty cool. Both of these heels work super well. They both have their pros and cons. What I recommend if you're new to crocheting socks is to try both and see which one you prefer, so that you can then modify patterns to, you know, make the heel that you prefer. In my Bazik sock pattern, I have included options for an afterthought heel and a short row heel so that you can practice. The next thing I wanted to talk about, the third topic, is how to avoid second sock syndrome. This is something that happens with any pattern where there's two of something, whether it be mittens, sleeves, or the second sock. Especially if the first one was long or frustrating, you just never get into making the second one, and that sucks. You know, you want to complete your projects. I know you want to complete your projects. So here's my favorite trick, and it's weird to me because I feel like it's not that much of a tip. Like, it's just something that people should do. But here it is, my life hack. You're going to crochet both toes first, and then both feet. If it's short row heel, you're doing both heels and then both legs. And then instead, if it's in a sock with an afterthought heel, what you're going to do is you're going to go the toes of both socks, then the foot, then the leg, and then the heels for both socks. If you use this method, you're always making progress on the entire pair of socks, and it has the added advantage that your tension will remain more similar throughout both socks. Whereas if you make a sock and you come back to it 3 months later, it's probably going to be like your tension's going to be all different for many reasons. So that's my life hack to avoid second sock syndrome. The last thing I want to touch on, and it's, I think, one of the most important, is you have to understand crochet stretch to get proper fit for your socks. So one of the biggest differences between knitting and crochet is how both of these techniques stretch. Knit socks have a ton of horizontal stretch, so they're easy to pull up onto your foot and leg. Crochet, on the other hand, doesn't have a ton of horizontal stretch because of how the stitches are structured. So you have to account for that. You have to pay special attention to how the sock will fit over the largest part of what it's covering, right? And that's the diagonal between the end of your heel and the place where your foot and ankle meet, or your foot and leg meet. So that bend there, the distance between the end of your heel and that bend, that's the largest part that your sock has to fit over. If that area isn't properly fit to your foot, you're not going to be able to put the sock on, which defeats the purpose. So how are you going to fix that? Normally, if you're following a pattern, the designer will have thought about all of this. Just trust the pattern. But if they haven't, or if they did and it's just not enough stretch for your foot, that's totally fine. What you can do is you can add stitches at the end of the foot section before you make the heel or the space for the afterthought heel. And then you're going to decrease those same stitches when you get to the leg. So let's say you need to add 10 stitches, you're going to remove 10 stitches from the leg after. Another way is to, when you get to the end of the foot, use a slightly larger hook, like half a size larger, so that you'll have more stretch in that zone. You don't want to go too big with the hook so that the stitches are sloppy, but just, you know, half a side can give you just enough stretch to fix the issue. If you're working from scratch, if you want to create your own sock or a sock pattern, just choose stitches that have natural flexibility. Chains, no flexibility, avoid them. But everything else, like, play with how much horizontal stretch you have. Always try on the socks as you go and make sure that when you get to this diagonal area, work a little bit more of the leg and then try to put them on. If there's too much stretch in that diagonal area, frog and start over, adding stitches or changing to a larger hook. Another option, and I have this in a few patterns, is that you can crochet socks sideways because there's a ton of stretch vertically. So instead of crocheting in the round from the toe to the leg, you can crochet in rows across the entire sock. So if you look at patterns like my flanken socks, that's how they're crocheted. So, you know, you can go with different constructions to try and account for the fact that crochet stitches don't have a ton of horizontal stretch. So I've been talking for a while now, and I hope that what I have told you has convinced you that you need to try to crochet socks, or give them a second try if you've already tried and weren't convinced with the result. If you're new to crochet socks, again, I strongly recommend starting with toe-up socks, experimenting with the different heel types, and working the socks in stages to keep up your motivation. Of course, always keep in mind that crochet stretch is different from knit stretch, so you need to work accordingly. I do want to hear from you. If you have crocheted socks, or if this has convinced you to crochet socks, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite heel type? How did you find this video helpful? Follow me everywhere. Follow me everywhere, and I will keep trying to convince you to make crochet socks. Or if you're already crocheting socks, I will feed that habit for you. So as we say in French, bon crochet. Talk to you soon.